Well, hey everybody, I'm Chris Uriarte, partner at Glenbrook Partners, and today I want to talk to you about one of our favorite topics to talk about over the years, which is tokenization. And there's always a lot of things going on with tokenization, so we thought this was a good time, sort of in a half-year mark here, to talk about some of the things that we're hearing, some of these interesting trends, some of the innovation around tokenization, because there is a lot to talk about, and it is a topic that certainly isn't going away anytime soon. So, we have this ongoing joke here at Glenbrook Partners that we just can't stop talking about tokenization. And in fact, that's actually the title of one of our most listened to podcasts of all time on our Payments on Fire podcast. You can check that out at glenbrook.com if you're not familiar with it. And this year really is no exception as we continue to see significant growth in network tokenization utilization, as well as some really interesting use cases. So we typically see some interesting information come out of Visa and Mastercard in May or June of each year as they both report their earnings. They're often talking at a lot of different investment conferences, such as the Bernstein Investment Conference, which took place about 6 weeks ago or something like that. Tokenization is really an interesting niche topic that both of these networks tend to cover in all these different forums, which I think really demonstrates the importance of the technology to their respective ecosystems. And again, this year has really been no exception. So let's dive into it and talk about some of the themes that we've seen over the course of the last year and some of the messaging that we're getting from these networks. So first of all, in general, we're continuing to see year over year growth in regard to the number of tokens that are issued on each of the different networks. And we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in just a minute. But we're also seeing, probably as a result of that, is year over year growth of the percentage of tokenized transactions that each networks are seeing. And then both networks are absolutely, they have this theme where they're talking about this future that is very much focused on a tokenized world where everything is tokenized in the future. We've still got a long way to go, but there's a lot of things that are driving us in that direction. And you'll see the networks talk about tokenization being really a key foundational technology to enable new use cases, such as those that are enabled by AI, which of course is another topic that we can't stop talking about, but we'll get into that in just a moment. So what are some of the specific headlines here? MasterCard reports that 35% of all transactions across their network are now tokenized. They didn't give a total number of tokens that have been issued on the network this year. We've heard that in the past from MasterCard, but I think that's just an oversight. We know most definitely that there are billions of tokens out there issued by MasterCard. Visa, on the other hand, was upfront in saying that they've added 1 billion new tokens just in the last quarter alone, which I think is pretty amazing. And they've quoted that the total number of tokens they have now issued is close to 14 billion, 13.7 billion tokens have been issued on the Visa network. So Visa now reports that 50% of all transactions running across their network are now tokenized. So that is pretty staggering growth for a technology that's really, I think, has only come to maturity over the course of the last 3, 4, 5 years. You could certainly argue with me on that. However, much of the recent discussions have been focusing on the future. And both networks now view tokenization as a core component of new services. Tokenization now is just part of the core plumbing of these networks. And like it or not, it's going to be an integral part of all types of payments innovation in the future. We're certainly not going to stop talking about it anytime soon. So there's a number of highlights that I'd like to call out just to get us started from an innovation perspective. And also not just kind of pure innovation. Some of this we've heard before, but changes that are going to drive more and more usage towards tokenization. And the first one that comes to mind, we've talked about this in the past, we've written about it in the past, so do a little bit more research if you're not familiar with this, is MasterCard's sunsetting of manually entered account numbers in the European Union with a target date of 2030. So MasterCard's view is that there is going to be a world that is going to be driven by things like click to pay, the continued use of digital wallets. And those different wallet technologies will use tokenization as the way to transfer the credentials from a merchant to the network. So no longer are you going to have consumers actually typing in their card numbers. That's MasterCard's target, and they're still sticking to it as far as we hear right now. So that's kind of will be a big driver of continued tokenization usage in the EU. Of course, agentic commerce, right? And we'll talk more and more about agentic commerce in just a moment. It is the hot topic of the day, most definitely. If you're not familiar with it, if you've been living under a rock, this involves using AI-driven agents, right, to automatically complete payments on behalf of the consumers. So tokenization is a core technology that's going to enable this. And MasterCard has done a good job at explaining its agent pay framework, and Visa as well has what it's called its intelligent commerce framework. I'll explore this a little deeper in a moment. But lots and lots of effort being put into use cases around agentic commerce, which uses tokenization at its foundation as well. Visa is also extending tokens to the blockchain, which what it calls its VTAP framework, or its Visa Tokenized Asset Platform framework. So the goal here is essentially to enable banks to tokenize fiat currencies on a blockchain, on different blockchain networks. And VTAP really provides a framework for banks to do a lot of different functionality: minting, burning, transferring fiat-backed tokens, etc. There's lots of things that can be done with this framework that they've created, both in regard to tokenized deposits, stable coins, etc., and also trying to create a little bit of a lab, if you will, for institutions to create new tokenized use cases. So do some research on that if you want to dig a little deeper in it. And then both networks also talk about this future where we have this broader use of tokenization, where other data assets are eventually tokenized by these services. This is a little fuzzy now, not really quite sure what they're thinking here, but it just shows that there is a lot more that's being thought of beyond just tokenizing the card number across the network. So, lots of interesting things to think about. But what about agentic commerce? So we can't skip agentic commerce because, as I've said, it's the hot topic right now. Unless you've been living under a rock, as I said, since the start of the year, you'd probably agree with me that this is probably one of the hottest topics in the payments community. Enough so that we've seen MasterCard recently hold a substantial global product briefing on this topic, opening up the virtual floor to Q&A from analysts and payments pundits like myself alike. And MasterCard has highlighted a few really interesting areas as to how tokenization is going to play an integral role in its agent pay framework. So agent pay it sees as being a framework that's going to certify and register legitimate agents. It's going to allow agents then to have access to these agent-specific tokens, and of course to ultimately complete payments transactions on behalf of consumers. And MasterCard's Chief Product Officer, Jan Lambert, I think there was an interesting way that he put it. He essentially describes these agents as a new type of token requester within the ecosystem. So that's a very interesting way, I think, at looking at it. And, they certainly see authenticated tokens as playing a really critical role to ensure the authenticity of the payment transactions that are being driven by these agents. And of course, these tokens are going to be transmitted to merchants as part of the purchase, but they also describe additional enriched data that will come along and help enhance the transaction, to help better facilitate the transaction on the merchant side, deal with customer service issues, returns, things along those lines. And the thing that we're hearing, not just from MasterCard, but also from Visa, is that tokenization can occur using, will utilize a lot of additional frameworks that the networks are putting out there, such as the network managed passkey frameworks that both of these networks have talked about over the course of the last year. So Visa has very similar messaging in their intelligent commerce framework, similar to what we've heard from MasterCard, and we expect there to be sort of a bit of an arms race between both networks as agentic commerce continues to scale and become more popular. So You know, closer to home, though, we see merchants continuing to refine their tokenization strategies, trying to take advantage of really these inherent benefits that have been pitched to them since the advent of this technology. Some of those key things, core value proposition, of course, are things like better lifecycle management. Both networks quote higher authorization rates. There's a lot of controversy and discussion around what those rates are, what's driving those rates, et cetera. I'm not going to get into it here. It's been discussed at length. We've talked about this at length. You could do a lot of research on this. And of course, there's a trust factor in this, particularly with authenticated tokens, where the networks are saying, listen, greater trust, reduced risk when you're looking at these authenticated tokens coming across the network to a merchant. So those are the key value proposition points, of course. But tokenization is still fraught with a number of challenges as well. And, we still do not see universal support from all global card issuers. Merchants experience some performance inconsistencies from many issuers, from issuer to issuer. And the current state of play very often requires merchants to maintain the primary account number. So they still have to store the primary account number. In a lot of cases, the merchant still needs to fall back to utilizing the primary account number because they see an issuer isn't, performing well with tokens, maybe sometimes is the case. So they wind up going back to the original account number. So a lot of this often requires a lot of analytics, a lot of customized processing logic, and very often, as I said, the frequent fallback to PAN, which sometimes needs to be figured out on kind of a per issuer basis or a per transaction basis. But we really do believe that tokenization is going to continue to grow. We're going to see these new use cases we've talked about. We're going to see greater merchant adoption across existing use cases. But all of this, these challenges that I've just talked about, plus the introduction of these new paradigms, is going to make implementation a lot more complex, implementation and management of this for merchants. So, merchants are going to have to do a lot of work, a lot of testing. They're going to have to find the right technology partners, the right processing partners, vaults, token requesters, etc., to help create a smooth solution and a smooth experience for their consumers at the end of the day. So that's our update today. I want to stress to folks that you keep in touch with us. We've got daily updates coming through our free Payments News newsletter, as well as thought leadership through Payments Views and our famous podcast on payments, Payments on Fire, and our regular payments notes that come out to all our different subscribers there. So check us out at glenbrook.com. You're welcome to reach out to me, Chris at glenbrook.com. And I want to thank you for listening to us today. And this, of course, is not the last time we're going to be talking about tokenization. So we'll keep an eye on this and we'll keep you updated. Thanks and have a great day. Speak to you soon.